Hey, Montel Williams here. Look, I've got some incredible news to share with you. I want to tell you about my brand new book that's coming out that's called The Sailing of the Intrepid. Now, this book is more than just an historical account. It's a tribute to the brave men who served aboard the USS Intrepid and a celebration of their extraordinary legacy. Writing this book was such an incredible story, and I'm really thrilled to be able to share it with you. So don't wait to grab your little piece of history. The book is available right now to order. You can go to montelmedia.com, and you can even get a limited autograph signed copy. Now, thank you so much for your support. I can't wait for you to read this incredible story of the sailing of the Intrepid. I'll see you on the pages. Hey guys, welcome to Free Thinking with Montel, where we tackle big issues head on, challenge our perceptions, and hear the stories of individuals who dared to make a difference in their lives and the world around them. As someone who has battled MS, I know what it's like to rely on breakthrough medications and trust in the healthcare system. What happens when the system itself is compromised? What happens when greed and corruption outweigh the needs of patients? My guest today is the author of the new book, False Claims. In a book, she takes us on a harrowing journey as a whistleblower exposing corruption, Medicare fraud, and devastating human impact of profit-driven decisions in the pharmaceutical world. She's a former top pharmaceutical sales rep who found herself in the fight of her life against one of America's biggest players, Big Pharma. Lisa, welcome so much to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today on Free Thinking.
Thank you, Montel, for having me today.
Absolutely. Let's go back for a second before we dig deeply into this topic. Let's start with your background. Where you went to school, where you grew up, what you studied. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in a small town named Pittman, New Jersey. Very small town. And in the 60s, I was born in 1960, but I grew up in a horrific household with two parents who should have never been parents.
Oh, there you go.
Put it that way.
Sure.
I think I call him my biological father because he really wasn't a father. He checked off every checklist that you could imagine for mental health issues. Unmedicated, untreated. And I checked off every abuse category that you could imagine.
Wow.
So it was difficult. And you're about my age. Back then in the 60s and 70s, there was no DIFUS. There was nothing. Nobody went to a psychiatrist for help.
Correct.
And everything was pushed underneath the rug. So it was a struggle. But on the other hand, I had a nonna or grandmother, an Italian. I used to spend summers at her farm. And she was married. She was my step-grandmother to my father's father. So she knew the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. But she didn't say anything, and she wound up my mentor and my person of strength, who taught me all about morals, integrity, and character, and also work ethic. And one of her suggestions was the only way to make something of herself, basically to get out of the household, was to go to school, get a scholarship, and go to college. It was education in order to be successful and in order to get out of that hellhole that I was in.
And what did you go to school for?
Well, I majored at Albright College in biology, Spanish, and German, and I was originally pre-med.
And what took you to pharmaceutical sales? How did you get into that?
Well, I wound up in college loving snow skiing. One of my sorority sisters turned me on to snow skiing. Of course, I was raised in poverty, so she gave me all the equipment, her secondary equipment. And I'm thinking, wow, in medical school, you're going to have all this debt. And I was poor. So I didn't want to be working for about 10 years after medical school and residency to pay off this debt. So one of the counselors at college at Albright said, there's this position that would be great. Pharmaceutical sales rep. and you would use your science background. So I'm thinking, good money. They gave you a car. I would be okay, and I would be able to pay off at least part of my college debt.
And before we dig into the topic of the book, give us an overview of what a
Yeah.
farmer sales rep job is like in general.
Well, taking out everything that occurred later on, it was amazing. And I knew when I started I was going to sell legal, ethically, and morally because of my background from my grandmother. I mean, they give you a great base salary. You don't have to pay for car insurance. You get a new car every other year. It's a fleet vehicle and you have your choice. And it wasn't a cheap car. They pay for your medical insurance, which is I call it the Porsche version, was amazing back then. They pay for your lunch, they pay for your gas, um, health insurance, medical insurance, life insurance, any type of insurance, dismemberment. It and the bonuses were phenomenal. And also, I love the office staff and the physicians.
But I mean, I watched the that what was that show, streaming show Dope Sick, where they kind of went through the machinations of Big Pharma when it came to OxyContin, and they talked a little bit about some of the reps there. They showed a lot of reps there, literally, basically going in and hawking, oxycodone, in a
Yeah.
way that really was just reprehensible. I mean, that's not the general life of a sales rep, is it? It
Yes.
is. Okay.
In the very beginning, you basically a sales rep works out of their home.
Mhm.
So you don't report to an office. You just get up. It's the honor system. You leave and you make various calls on doctors. For about the first year, everything was fine and I was known for my intelligence. And we used really good science data to sell the doctors, and it was according to the package insert. But about a year after I started, I had a buddy who was a competitor say, Lise, give me like 2 seconds. I'm going to drop an invitation off to this doctor. Well, I listened, and it was an invitation to take doctors to Bimini, snorkeling and scuba diving. And I almost fell off my seat in the doctor's office. And that's how all the bribes, the trips, it just started
Is that the normal
with
process in marketing a new drug in healthcare to healthcare providers?
when I was in there, yes.
Wow.
It was pay to play. That's what I called it. And I'm thinking, I just wanted to be known as, and it was very sexist and a lot of misogyny, but I just wanted to be known for my brains and character. And I couldn't compete because I wouldn't do any bribes. It went to dine and dashes where they would give their credit card in a restaurant to the restaurant, and a doctor would bring his family and extended family and grab as much food as they can. I never did them.
Wow.
And it was just lowering the the level of intelligence that I wanted to be known by. I just could not do
And
this.
in your opinion, how much knowledge did those doctors have of the drugs that they were trying to be bribed into buying?
Well, they knew the drug, but I blame the new managed care system that led the doctors to take these bribes because the new managed care healthcare system cut their reimbursement. And I think the pharma companies sensed this and moved in with bribes. So if a physician's who was making 200 grand is down to 100 grand, the wife is like, where's this money coming from? And that opened it up to reimbursement for speaking on a drug, which was like 3 to 5,000, extra ways to make money by the pharma companies. They knew the data, but they were also persuaded to prescribe off label. And that is what bothered
And
me.
did they really dig into the information about about the drug? Did they know what they were prescribing off label? You know what I'm saying? Like, do they really understand that
Well,
some of the side effects?
they knew it, but they were paid to do it. They were paid to go away for a weekend and learn how to prescribe the drug or sell the drug to other doctors off label. And they took the bait in a lot of cases. Or they took the bait even though a competitor drug was better for patients from a therapeutic standpoint. They were paid to do talks either on this drug or paid in other ways. So they chose the drug that they got paid the most money or more kickbacks.
And knowingly knowing taking this money, knowing what they were doing. I mean, it's not like this is something that was, under well, it is under the table, but I mean, they clearly knew that they were prescribing something that was not as good as something else, but they didn't care. They just went ahead and did so, right?
Absolutely. I watched it not only in my industry, I mean, in my company, but I heard other presentations and other reps speaking from other companies. And I was like, all I want to be known is for my brains. And if you would call Lisa, she would give you an answer straight up. And it wasn't off label. It was, I know or I don't know. And here's the science. And it wasn't bogus science. Yeah. I could not tell you one company that I witnessed. Of course, it's my opinion, what I witnessed that was doing things up and up.
Well, tell us about Questar Pharmaceuticals and why you were so excited to join their team.
Well, I had sold an MS drug. It was a disease modifying drug when I was with Serono. It was called Rebif. So I had MS experience. But number
And
one,
I'm not. I will say this, right? I remember
but
when Rebif came out, and there was one of the doctors was suggesting that I switched over to that, and I just refused because I was already on an immunomodifying drug. I won't give out the name, and I've been on for now
okay.
almost 24 years. And I was like, no, I'm not changing over. And I got such a hard sell to change over to that drug. I was like, no, not happening. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it ain't broke, I like what I'm doing. And that's what I've been on now for almost 25 years.
Well, like you said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But why were they trying to push you so hard to switch? I mean, if you go back to the Hippocratic Oath, if you're doing well, it's not in the doctor's position to try to switch you.
Right.
I mean, all your numbers are good, your relapses are spaced out. It just, to me, it
And,
didn't make
right. And the
sense.
objective is to do, when you say Hippocratic Oath, is to do no harm. But then also at the same time,
Right.
if you read the data yourself, now that's one of the things that I did, when I first started, when I was first diagnosed with MS, and I got into the MS world of biologics and in the MS world of, the medications that they had. There were only three at the time when I first was diagnosed, and I did a really deep dive into all three of them and literally looked at the one that had the most efficacious reaction. Though there was complaints about it because of side effects, but those side effects were, I found out and I figured out over the course of this 24 years that one of the problems with the drug I was taking is the fact that, they gave it to you originally. They gave it to us in this configuration where I had to mix it with some saline solution and another bottle and
Oh,
mix them together
wow.
and shake it up. Then you inject it in yourself. And they always gave you these big needles. And I realized after the third time that I'd shot myself, and it says, because it's supposed to be subcutaneous, meaning right under the skin into the fat, not into the muscle.
Right.
Um, I started realizing that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't really judge getting that needle in appropriately at the right depth without it hitting my muscle. So I was having site reactions. Now I'll tell you something I
Wow.
did that was very interesting. That I've literally flew all the way to Israel and talked to the manufacturer about changing since. And I've been using this drug now for 24 years. the fifth injection that I took when I got the package in the mail, and I took my first injection, fifth injection. I went to one of my doctors and I said, "Why do I have to use this needle that is so damn big? I mean, this needle is so large. I don't even understand how I'm supposed to do this sub-Q. It can't go sub-Q because it goes so deep when I stick it in." And the doctor said, "Well, you know what?
Yeah.
Here's what I'll do. Why don't you try these infant diabetic needles?" And the infant diabetic needles were only this big. And I said, okay. So I got one of those, and
Yeah.
instead of using the needle that it came with, I started injecting that into the back of a little infant needle. I've not had one site reaction since. I'm probably one of the most compliant people with that drug. As a matter of fact, I went to visit the company that
Yeah.
actually sells it, and had a long conversation with some of the doctors who were part of the team that invented it. And they asked me, well, have you missed any shots? I have not. In the course of 24 years, when I was taking it on a daily basis, I probably only missed my shot 2 times. And I would pick it up
Wow.
3 hours later and get it. Then, since I've now been on the 3 times a week version, I've only missed it once in the last 6 years. So compliance, 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 I think is part of the reason why I've done so well. And so is the same information that's come from the people who manufacture it, because most people would have such bad site reactions that they would skip 3 or 4 days and they try it again. And they skip a day, try it again. Then they skip a week, try it again. It's like the drug's not going to work unless you got it in your system.
And consistently a therapeutic level too.
Yes,
And I think what you've done is you took control
no question.
of the disease and your treatment, and you did that deep dive into the data.
Yeah,
And that's where, whether it's MS or other disease states, I think that's what's lacking is, like, say, cancer. You have to do a deep dive before you take anything and look and see where the data is published
right,
in a reputable journal before you take it,
right.
because you're playing, like, as a cancer patient, you're playing with your disease state
Correct,
and your life.
correct. And
So,
especially when it comes to drugs like the MS drugs, which are immune modifiers. So you're playing
yes.
with your entire health, everything. You're literally putting something in your body that's going to make you more susceptible to other things if you don't take it the right way. So anyway, but let's go back to Questcore for a second. You were excited about joining them, and I'm sorry, I didn't get.
No, no, that's fine. That's fine. You're passionate about your treatment, and that is wonderful to hear. But I saw the advertisement and wound up for a territory with Questcore in New Jersey. And the reason why I wanted to go with this company, number one, the idea is it was such a small startup. So from a financial end, you want to be on the ground floor
Mhm,
of anything.
mhm.
That's any person's dream. And I looked at this and I said, let me look at their drug Acthar. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Because as you know, if you have a relapse, it's oral prednisone, IV Solumadrol,
Yep,
and a lot of cases with those treatments, the side effects are sometimes worse.
horrific. Yeah,
And I've been on high dose for being an asthmatic of prednisone, and I'm thinking maybe I just want to be short of breath and not take it
right,
because terrible.
right,
So I saw this drug as I did a deep dive as a non-steroidal, and I went, "Wow, I want to work for this company." But in training, I realized that Acthar, and the history was interesting. It started in the 40s and it was post World War II. It wound up with 19 indications, but back then there was no money to bring a drug to market. So Dr. Kendall, who invented this medication, put it in a box, put it on a shelf, and it collected dust. Fast forward to 2001, where Steve Cart and Don Bailey, the two CEOs, dusted this drug off, saw how it already had the indications. One was for MS, exacerbations and or flares, and they're like, "Wow, it's non-steroidal." All the research was done, and that's how they brought it to market. beginning in 2001.
And then,
But
but in your book, False Claims, it dives deep into what you consider corrupt practices. Explain that.
eh, well, when was in training, they started with off label promotion. The on label promotion of Acthar when a patient has a relapse or an exacerbation is you need to be on the drug. One vial is for 5 days. So you need 4 or 5 vials, which is 3 or 4 weeks of treatment in order to get back to where you were before you had that relapse. But in training, they started initially with a physician who came in at Dr. Staley Broad, and he was promoting it for 5 days. And I'm like, what is this? 5 days? That's like 1/5 of what an MS patient should be taking. I ignored it. I did at home training, in house training was 2 weeks. I just ignored it. I said, look, I'm going to do it by the package insert. I don't care. To me, it's non-steroidal. But what happened is the insurances were not paying for the drug. The price of the drug at the time that I went was 23,000 for one vial, 5 days. So if they promoted it on package insert, it would be 5 vials times 23,000
Over
versus
$100,000 for a drug. It's crazy.
yes. Well, nobody was covering it. So what they did is they they did a switcheroo and got an orphan drug status by one of the other indications, which was for infantile spasms, which it worked well and they need a lot of vials, but everybody paid for it, including Medicare. Once the drug got orphan drug status, they got coverage with Medicare and Medicaid. So, hence, they could promote the 5 day because they already got financial coverage by those two government agencies and other health insurance companies for MS exacerbations. So, soon as I got out in the field, not only did they want me to promote 5 day, but they started buying the staff with gift cards, um, buying girls like outfits, pocketbooks. I mean, I had one rep out west tell me he bought his physician a $5,000 Armani suit to do a talk. Another rep bought her speaker doctor a $15,000 Birkin handbag. And I'm like, I shop at TJ Maxx. I'm from I was like, every way you could imagine, it was the worst bribes and kickbacks I've ever seen in my 32-year career. They were getting doctors to do talks at, and to other doctors, and they were $5,000 they were being paid a talk. Then they started doing patient programs and which are you I'm sure you're familiar
Sure.
with MS patient programs,
Sure.
and they would have an MS patient come in, they would train them and take them to a very nice weekend and train them to promote it to the patients off label. I used the drug for 5 days. So when the patients would hear this, they would circumvent their neurologist and go to the neurologist's office. And once they have an exacerbation, they're like, I want Acthar. They demanded it. Well, what happened is that's about the only thing is that I did patient programs and some dinners. I never gave bribes. I just ethically, morally, I couldn't do it.
Mhm.
And what I saw at these patient programs were patients who were on Acthar getting worse. Because when they took 5 days, one vial, they really should have taken it for 3 or 4 weeks. They never got to baseline. So the relapsing remitting patient got progressively worse in their disease. And I would see these patients come in, they were walking. 3 months later, they had a cane. And then I saw him go to wheelchairs. And that's what bothered me so much from an ethical and moral standpoint. And at the time, one of my coworkers, he was fired, and he said, Lise, this is the worst I've ever seen. His name was Pete. I'm going to the feds.
And that's
So,
what led you to go undercover, right?
well, yes. And I told him I had to think about it because I have a special needs son and I was a single parent. I said, I don't make a decision. This is a big decision. Well, I had done a patient program. I told him, give me a week. And I was going to the bathroom, and all of a sudden, somebody's yelling, Lisa, Lisa. And she had a cane, very young, early 30s. And her name was Melanie. And she just got diagnosed with lymphoma in addition to MS. And she asked me, she said, Lisa, is Acthar going to help me? And I gave her the line, which legally I couldn't give her medical advice. And I told her, you have to go see your neurologist. And she turned around, she went back into the program, and I went to the bathroom. I lost it.
Well,
I cried for 15 to 20 minutes. I could not get my act together. And I finally got my act together. The speaker, the person who had MS, they both finished. The dinner was over. I got into my car and I called Pete. I said, Pete, I'm in. I don't care what it takes. Let's bring QuestCorps down to their knees for what they've done to these MS patients. I said, I don't care what I have to do. I'm in.
and you went undercover for almost a decade, correct?
Jane Doe, yes.
How I mean,
Yes.
how did first off, first I would think that going undercover for 4 years would have been enough, or 3 years would have been enough. How come you had to do it for 10 years? Was that just feeding information the
Well,
entire time?
these cases, they're called Ketam cases, which means in Latin, in the name of the king. Whistleblower is the same thing. They could take 7 to 10 years. And what happens is, as my attorneys Begel and Orlo indicated, is Lisa, this isn't going to be over in a year. So you have to stay strong. We just have to keep feeding evidence to the government. And initially, the case is Jane Doe and John Doe versus QuestCorps. Then, as soon as the government decides that they want to take over the case, it's called they intervene, and then the case becomes the government's case. Well, it took to 2019, almost 8 years of me being Jane Doe and funneling thousands of pages of information. I didn't even need to wear a wire. The DOJ, FBI, and HHS had so much information. But my attorneys, Begelman and Orlo, said that many of these whistleblowers have gone insane or been admitted to a mental institution
How,
because they cannot handle the stress.
how did you
And
handle the
it
stress,
was,
girlfriend?
well, considering I was diagnosed with advanced cancer 3 months into the investigation and had to appear in front of the DOJ after major cancer surgery, I just had to mentally disassociate myself and not put my emotions into it. It was more of getting your head strong. I looked at this as a third job. It was mommy to a special needs son. It was, I'm a pharma rep by day, and I was a secret agent woman for the third job. I just knew Melanie was in my head and is still a ghost. I had to bring justice for Melanie. Like when I was being sexually abused, nobody advocated for me. Nobody advocated for my special needs son except me. And I could not go to bed at night if I didn't bring this case to fruition in my mind.
The book is out now. It's called False Claims, where you go into deep about
Yeah.
this. Where can people get the book? If you real quick, I'll make sure they understand.
Well, they could go on my website at lisapratta.com. They can order it off of Amazon. It comes out Tuesday. Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble, HarperCollins, Apple Books, or any other websites that sell, books
Sure,
in
sure.
general.
Well, how come? Why did it take so long? I mean, again, I hear what you're saying, but 10 years of information when they had the information probably in the first years. Why did it take the government so long to do something?
Well, in a lot of cases, the government wants to prosecute the low hanging fruit. And when they intervene, they want to win this case beyond a reasonable doubt. So if it went criminal, they have to prove 80% beyond a reasonable doubt. This case wound up a civil case. They had so much information with this company and when they prosecute other companies that there is no way a company will want to go to trial because they know they're guilty. So they wind up settling a monetary settlement or
What was the
damages.
end result when it comes to Questcore? Was that? I mean, what eventually were they
Well,
held accountable?
Questcore was a little bit different. Questcore only settled 10% of the case. And I knew this was fishy because most companies settle 100%. And I indicated to my attorney, something stinks with this. We were going to go to trial. And then, when 6 months later, Questcore, the other side, what became Mallinckrodt, was implicated in the opioid. Just like you said, dope stick.
Yes.
They were the third worst offender in the opioid. I called my attorneys, Begeman and Orlo, and I said, please tell the government they're going to claim bankruptcy. They're wasting their time practicing depositions. They settled 10% of the case because they knew they were going to go broke with the opioid lawsuits. And that's what happened. 14 months later, they filed bankruptcy.
Wow. And what can business and policymakers and consumers do to prevent stories like this from happening again?
Well, there, I would hope to be invited to DC to help to make change. It's policies. There has to be, in my opinion, some government price freezing permanent because what these companies are doing in terms of price increases, they're doing it twice a year, like 20%, 20%. So that's one thing. I think what would really be, I call it drastic intervention, would be the government or the DOJ can swoop in anytime and do like computer forensics to see if any hanky panky is going on via email, like directives, or just show up at a rep's house and ride with them.
Right.
Something like that, because it's so far out of control.
And this is still systemic. I mean, it's out of control throughout the entire industry, is it not? Still.
Well, I work for 7 companies, and I always call them a football fan. Different, you know, different team, same playbook.
Got it.
It was like, hey, maybe the plays are tweaked a little bit, but in my opinion, I didn't see anything above board
Same pattern.
at all.
How do you believe all the recent downsizing in the federal government will impact oversight when it comes to the pharma industry? I mean, right now we're cutting funding for any of the oversight, and so therefore they could run amok again, right?
Well, possibly, but I think if I'm invited for my opinion with RFK,
Mhm.
they're targeting pharma industry in general. So it's a start with like price lowering, etc. But there has to be, and I'm just talking about pharma in general. I have a whole nother opinion on healthcare.
Got it.
We could be here for two
Sure.
hours, but they're really not oversight. there needs to be complete control, starting from the beginning.
Right.
And then you wouldn't see these, whistleblower cases.
What was the most important aspect or most important thing to you when you wrote this book, and what do you want readers to take away from it?
Well, my opinion is a person has to be an advocate like you were for yourself. You have to take control. Assume that your doctor is not on an up and up. The only one that cares about you is you. I don't think physicians care about anybody anymore. So you have to speak up and do the research just like you did for yourself. And if ask the doctor when you go into the office, do you talk for any companies? Are you a speaker?
Right.
Why are you prescribing this drug?
Right.
Or are you a speaker? Or is it based on science? Do you do talks? Do you do lunches? My thing is to know the answers of your questions before you ask the physician. Also, there's a website that you can go on to see if your doctor's on the tape. It's called openpaymentsdata.cms.gov.
Say that one more time.
Open Payments Data, DATA.cms, which is Medicare.gov. Not widely promoted. And you can type in your physician's name, investigate them before you go see them. And it'll say the doctor's supposed to report, I did $1,000 worth of rep lunches. I did $5,000 of speaker talks. So you'll see it all itemized. But for me, if it's 5,000 or more, run.
Got it.
Change doctors.
Well, I mean, you spent so much time trying to protect us all. What's next for you? I mean, clearly you don't work for them anymore. And I bet you kind of
True.
are persona non grata in the pharma world. So what's next for you?
Well, I'm going to continue a life of activism. I'm not done. My goal is to go down to DC and be an activist, not only for pharma, for everybody in the nation, but also healthcare, which I have experience in, change the entire healthcare system. And possibly my idea is to go back to the healthcare system in the 60s and 70s that we had, that was phenomenal and was more preventative than denying you care.
Got it.
Right now.
Lisa, we need you. You know that. So I got to say thank you so much for your courage.
Thank you.
Sharing your
Thank
story.
you.
The book is called False Claims. It's anywhere you can get a book right now. Go on out and get a copy of it. This book isn't just about corruption or corporate corruption. It's about resilience, integrity, and the fight for what's right. For everyone listening, False Claims is available on June 3rd through William Morrow. I urge you to pick up a copy of it. And absolutely, for all of my MS followers and MS warriors out there, you're battling life-altering condition. You deserve better. And that's why we need voices like Lisa's to shine a light on these critical issues. Lisa, I got to say again, thank you so much for being part of the show today. For all of you out there, stay tuned. Make sure you tune in next time. Stay open-minded, stay curious, and keep free thinking, okay? Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.